Tylenol, the children's Tylenol, the chewable, have not been implicated yet.
Exactly what is going on right now. They're just assuming that...
In Chicago 1982, September 28th, a 12-year-old girl named Mary Kellerman was rushed to the hospital after consuming a capsule of Tylenol, which is a brand of medication advertised for reducing pain, reducing fever, and relieving the symptoms of allergies, cold, cough, headache, and influenza. The active ingredient of its original flagship product is paracetamol and has no known side effects.
The next 4 brands combined, hospitals can trust Tylenol to give effective relief without the stomach irritation possible with aspirin or any other type of pain reliever. Well, if hospitals use Tylenol, shouldn't you? Tylenol, the pain reliever hospitals use most.
Yet, Mary Kellerman would die the next day.
And you can buy a more potent pain reliever without a prescription.
On September 29th, 3 family members from the Chicago suburb area called Arlington Heights would die. They were Adam Janis, 27 years old, Stanley Janis, 25 years old, and Teresa Janis, 20 years old. Nurse Helen Jensen would be tasked with investigating the strange deaths from the Janis family. She went to their household and she found a Tylenol bottle with an accompanying receipt indicating it had been purchased the same day. After noticing that there were 6 pills missing, she turned the bottle over to investigator Nick Pichos and reported her suspicion that it was related to the Janis deaths. Pichos called Dr. Edmund Donahue, Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for Cook County, who, suspecting that cyanide may be the culprit, asked Pichos to smell the bottle. When Pichos smelled an almond-like scent, Donahue asked the county's chief toxicologist, Michael Schaefer, to test the capsules, and Schaefer's team determined that 4 of the 44 remaining capsules from the Janis bottle contained nearly 3 times the fatal amount of cyanide. Authorities held a press conference advising the public not to take Tylenol for the time being.
Cyanide-contaminated Tylenol has been responsible for 3 deaths in the Arlington Heights area. Do not take Tylenol until further notice.
But on the 29th of September, 3 other individuals had already consumed Tylenol: Mary McFarland, 31 years old, Paula Prince, 35 years old, and Mary Reiner, 27 years old. All of them would die shortly after consumption. This is the mystery of the Chicago Tylenol murders. It was by chance that the bottle of Tylenol that Mary Kellerman used was inventoried by paramedics. Investigators noticed that the Janis bottle and the Kellerman bottle came from the same lot, MC 2880. Johnson & Johnson, the company which produced Tylenol, issued a recall for all the Tylenol from that lot. But when tainted bottles from other lots were discovered, for example, the pills in Mary McFarland's possession were traced to lots 1910 MD and MB 2738, the recall expanded to cover those lots and any bottle of extra-strength capsules, from any lot, purchased in the Chicago area, making it one of the largest pharmaceutical recalls ever made. A multi-agency investigation found the tampered pills to have been sold or still on the shelves at a variety of stores in the Chicago area, including 2 different Jewel Foods locations, one in Arlington Heights, one in Elk Grove Village, an Osco Drug Store in Schaumburg, a Walgreens and a Dominick's, both in Chicago, and a Frank's Finer Foods in Winfield. In an effort to reassure the public, Johnson & Johnson, the manufacturer of Tylenol, distributed warnings to hospitals and distributors and halted Tylenol production and advertising. After other incidents, like strychnine added to Tylenol bottles in California, a nationwide recall of Tylenol products was issued on October 5, 1982. An estimated 31 million bottles were in circulation, with a retail value of over $100 million, equivalent to $316 million in 2023. The company also advertised in the national media for individuals not to consume any of its products that contained paracetamol, after it was determined that only these capsules had been tampered with. Johnson & Johnson also offered to exchange all Tylenol capsules already purchased by the public for solid tablets. Customs at airports outside the U.S. were asking visitors if they brought Tylenol medicine with them. The craze was on, and the police had to move quickly. The tainted capsules were found to have been manufactured at 2 different locations, Pennsylvania and Texas, suggesting that the capsules were tampered with after the product had been placed on store shelves for sale. The police hypothesis was that someone had taken bottles off shelves in local stores of the Chicago area, placed potassium cyanide in some of the capsules, and then placed the packages back on the store shelves to be purchased by unknowing customers. In addition to the 5 bottles that led to the victims' deaths, a few other contaminated bottles were later discovered in the Chicago area. In early 1983, at the FBI's request, Chicago Tribune columnist Bob Greene published the address and grave location of the first and youngest victim, Mary Kellerman. The story, written with the Kellerman family's consent, was proposed by FBI criminal analyst John Douglas on the theory that the perpetrator might visit the house or gravesite if he were made aware of their locations. Both sites were kept under 24-hour video surveillance for several months, but the killer did not surface. A surveillance photo of Paula Prince purchasing cyanide-tampered Tylenol at a Walgreens in Chicago was released by the Chicago Police Department. Police believe that a bearded man seen just feet behind Prince may be the killer. During the initial investigations, a man named James William Lewis was accused of sending a letter to Johnson & Johnson demanding $1 million to stop the cyanide-induced murders. Upon his arrest, Lewis told authorities how the person behind the attacks may have carried out the killings by buying Tylenol, adding cyanide to the bottles, and returning them to the store shelves. Lewis was also found to have previously possessed a poisoning book, and, according to a confidential law enforcement document, his fingerprints were discovered on pages related to cyanide. Lewis denied being responsible for the poisonings, but he admitted to writing the letter, which he said he had worked on for 3 days. During the trial, his attorneys claimed that Lewis intended only to focus the attention of the authorities on his wife's former employer. Lewis was convicted of extortion and sentenced to 10 years in prison. In 2007, authorities determined that the letter had an October 1, 1982, postmark, meaning that, if Lewis's 3-day timeline was accurate, he would have begun working on the letter prior to the first news reports concerning the poisonings. When confronted with this information, Lewis recanted his timeline. Court documents released in early 2009 showed Department of Justice investigators concluded Lewis was responsible for the poisonings, despite the fact that they did not have enough evidence to charge him. In January 2010, both Lewis and his wife submitted DNA samples and fingerprints to the authorities. Lewis said, "If the FBI plays it fair, I have nothing to worry about." The DNA samples did not match any DNA recovered on the bottles. Lewis continued to deny responsibility for the poisonings. Lewis died on July 9, 2023, at age 76. Police also investigated a second man, Roger Arnold, a dock worker at a Jewel-Osco in Melrose Park, who told officers that he possessed potassium cyanide. Bar owner Marty Sinclair, whose establishment Arnold frequented, reported Arnold to the police, saying that Arnold had discussed killing people with a white powder and had become increasingly erratic after his marriage had dissolved. Arnold had worked with Mary Reiner's father at a warehouse, and Arnold's wife had been treated at a hospital across the street from the store in which Reiner bought her cyanide-laced pills. A copy of the poor man's James Bond, which contained instructions on making potassium cyanide, was found in Arnold's home. Arnold was held several times by the police, but never charged. In the summer of 1983, Arnold, mistaking John Stanisha for Marty Sinclair, shot and killed Stanisha, a computer consultant and father of 3, who was leaving the bar with multiple friends. Arnold was convicted of the killing in January 1984 and served 15 years of his 30-year sentence for second-degree murder, saying in 1996 from prison, "I killed a man, a perfectly innocent person. I had choices. I could have walked away." He died in June 2008. In 2010, Arnold's body was exhumed and subsequently reburied so that his femur bone could be removed for DNA testing. Arnold's DNA did not match the DNA samples discovered on the bottles. These DNA tests were done as part of some 21st-century investigation efforts by the authorities who now had better forensic technology to investigate their old leads. In early January 2009, Illinois authorities renewed the investigation. Federal agents searched the home of Lewis in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and seized a number of items. In Chicago, an FBI spokesman declined to comment but said, "We'll have something to release later possibly." In 2010, DNA samples were collected from Lewis and Arnold, whose body was exhumed for that purpose. Neither's DNA matched DNA samples found on the tainted bottles. Law enforcement officials received a number of tips related to the case coinciding with its 25th anniversary. In a written statement, the FBI explained, "This review was prompted, in part, by the recent 25th anniversary of this crime and the resulting publicity. Further, given the many recent advances in forensic technology, it was only natural that a second look be taken at the case and the recovered evidence." On May 19, 2011, the FBI requested DNA samples from Unabomber in connection to the Tylenol murders. Kaczynski denied having ever possessed potassium cyanide. The first 4 Unabomber crimes happened in Chicago and its suburbs from 1978 to 1980, and Kaczynski's parents had a suburban Chicago home in Lombard, Illinois, in 1982, where he stayed occasionally. The DNA results also didn't match with the DNA found in the Tylenol bottles. Kaczynski has not been indicted in connection with the Chicago Tylenol investigation, and no such federal prosecution is currently planned, the U.S. Attorney's Office said in court filings. While hundreds of copycats followed suit and dozens more died from medication tampering, none of them were as known as the Chicago Tylenol murders of 1982. In the aftermath, Johnson & Johnson's market share value dropped from 35% to 8%, but it rebounded in less than a year, a move credited to the company's prompt and aggressive reaction in recalling all the Tylenol bottles. In November, it reintroduced capsules in a new, triple-sealed package, coupled with heavy price promotions. Within several years, Tylenol regained the highest market share for the over-the-counter analgesic in the U.S. In 1991, Johnson & Johnson agreed to settle, for an undisclosed sum, all the lawsuits against it for the original Chicago area deaths. A spokesman for Johnson & Johnson stated that, "Though there is no way we could have anticipated a criminal tampering with our product or prevented it, we wanted to do something for the families and finally get this tragic event behind us." The 1982 incident inspired the pharmaceutical, food, and consumer product industries to develop tamper-resistant packaging, such as induction seals and improved quality control methods. Moreover, product tampering was made a federal crime. The incident prompted the pharmaceutical industry to move away from capsules, which were easy to contaminate as a foreign substance could be placed inside without obvious signs of tampering. Within the year, the FDA introduced more stringent regulations to avoid product tampering. This led to the eventual replacement of the capsule with the solid caplet, a tablet made in the shape of a capsule, as a drug delivery form and with the addition of tamper-evident safety seals to bottles of many sorts. The DNA in the original tampered bottles that were found back in 1982 remains, without a match.